Hello everyone, this is Sajal Devnath, and today I'm going to talk about VMware vRealize Code Stream, how we can integrate it with Artifactory and vRealize automation to automate our infrastructure tasks. Now, when you talk about vRealize Code Stream, typical use case of this particular product is in DevOps environment, where you integrate Code Stream with Artifactory, you manage your build system through Jenkins, do the testing integration with Jenkins, and build your continuous development CI/CD kind of environment. But today I want to talk about a slightly different use case using CodeStream. Uh, the major use case of CodeStream is still the DevOps environment. But what if I want to integrate CodeStream with vRealize automation and automate typically infrastructure tasks? For example, I deploy a virtual machine and then deploy a bunch of software, say in Linux environment, deploy a bunch of RPMs, configure the set up the RPM repository, and then deploy few of the packages, Python package or something else. I can do that, right? And in any data center environment, for all the servers, you don't have direct access to internet, so you have some kind of RPM repository. What if I can utilize Artifactory for to use it as a RPM repository or Python package repository, and utilize it in our environment and do certain kind of tests to check whether the virtual machine was deployed correctly or not. For example, whether the security configurations were right or not. In any environment, production kind of environment where we have integration with NSX and other security tools, still after a VM is deployed, it goes for a clearance from the security team that whether everything is correctly configured or not. Whether what if I can automate those tasks? So that is the aim of this particular session. What I'm going to do, I'm going to utilize Artifactory as a Yum repository and also a Python package repository. The advantage of using Artifactory as as RPM repository is that here in Artifactory you not only can get the RPMs that are available in general repositories, you can also upload your own custom RPM repository, RPM packages or Python packages or any other packages that you want to deploy in your environment. So, and all your servers can download it from your Artifactory server. So it's much more flexible than your typical RPM repository or any software packaging repositories. So the first thing of installation of Artifactory is pretty simple and straightforward. You download the Artifactory binaries, go to the bin folder, and remember the folder where you deploy or download the Artifactory package. You need to set it up as Artifactory home, this environment variable. So in this case, I have set up Artifactory in there. So this Artifactory underscore home variable, environment variable, needs to be set, and it should point to the folder where you have downloaded the Artifactory packages. Next, what you need to do is go to command line and run this install service Windows batch file. It will install the service in your system, and you can always check the status whether the Artifactory server is running or not. I can see that Artifactory server is running. You access Artifactory server through the server and 808:8081 Artifactory. That's the web page through which you access the Artifactory server. The first time you configure Artifactory, it would ask you for the normal configuration. It would set up the repositories for you. Let me log in here. And the first thing that you do is configure the repositories. So for example, you configure remote local repository and the remote repository, and there's a virtual repository that you configure. So local repositories are the repositories which are configured in the local server, where you can upload the configurations. That say, for example, you created a custom RPM file, you can upload it here, or a Python package that you have configured in your environment, you can upload it here and then integrate it with remote repository. So for example, let's see the example. This is my Python local repository. I just configured a local repository for type Python, package type Python, and again I have a shell scripts local repository. This is a custom repository, generic repository created by me, where I would upload my own shell scripts in a simple repository, central repository, right? Uh, if I go to the remote repositories, say for example CentOS remote, this again our package type is RPM package, and the URL is the remote server, CentOS repository. I'm successfully connected to to server, and then Python remote repository, say py remote repository. This is the Python package repository, central repository. So I have configured that, and then you can configure a virtual repository, which is a combination of both of these. So it's like you directly connect to this repository, it can serve requests both from local and remote. Like for example, this is my CentOS repository, virtual repository, which has CentOS local and CentOS remote, both the repositories. So once you configure the repositories, you can go ahead and traverse. Like for example, this CentOS remote, I can see I can query the remote server and get to see all the packages that is served from there. Similarly, if you remember, I had created a shell scripts local repository. I have uploaded certain deploy. You can configure, you can click on deploy, and you can see that you can drag and drop files here. So I have uploaded certain files like app.py and webinstall.sh, the shell script file. I can view the file what I have configured here, and say for example, I want to configure my system, my endpoints as configure yum repositories to point it to this artifactory server. I can simply go to say CentOS remote and set me up. It would ask you for the password if you want to maintain a password, and then it tells you that okay, you need to configure this artifactory.repo file, which is a typical repository file, and then configure this, copy paste and update that repository file to this, right? So this is how you set your artifactory server. Now let me go ahead and log into. And find the code stream server. So what I have done, I have already created a template in vCenter server, and created a customization specification for that, created a blueprint in vRealize automation, so that that particular virtual machine can be deployed through vRealize automation, right? And then in code stream, the first task that you need to do is configure endpoints. So when you configure endpoints, you can add an endpoint type. You can see that there are these are the endpoint types which are supported. The first thing I did is vRealize automation 7 type endpoint, give it a name, and give the tenant name for which you which tenant should be a should be an endpoint in vRealize code stream. Say for example vSphere.local, and then polling interval and maximum weight for IP configuration. You can give the URL and username password of vRealize code, vRealize automation. So for example, I have configured it in my environment. So this is the configuration that I have and the credentials here. Similarly, you can add vRealize orchestrator. If you are using external vRealize orchestrator, then only you need to add it here. Otherwise, you don't need to. Then Artifactory server, in a similar way, you need to mention the type of the server is Artifactory. Give it a name, server URL, and user ID password. Right? This is my Artifactory server that I have added, and there is another Jenkins server that I have configured. Probably I will cover that in a later session. Next, what I need to do is configure the pipelines. Now, configuring pipeline is in a kind of blueprint where you define what are the tasks that you want to automate, or what are the tasks that you uh, want vRealize code stream to run for you. So, for example, I have taken this particular test web GUI uh, pipeline. If I need whether you need to give it a name, and then you can parameterize the this pipeline. I have not covered that here. I'm just covering a basic pipeline creation. Go to stages. You add stages here, right? The stages can you can move the stages here and there, right? Once you add a stage, you can rename the stage and then add task. You can add task. When you add the task, you need to say which provider this task would be of type, so I can select the first task that I have created is deploy virtual machine, which is a vRealize automation 7 type of task. So I give it a name, say test, and say okay, and then I click on it. I need to save the pipeline to configure task, and since it's vRealize 7, it asks for an endpoint and then which blueprint you want to run, right? So I have these blueprints configured in vRealize automation. I can simply choose a blueprint, and then it shows me the details of the blueprints like number of deployments, release days, that, and you have text output as well, that this is the configuration that goes at the back end. So you save the task and the task is saved for you. Like for example, here in this task I'm taking VRA lab local as my endpoint machine, and I'm taking VRCS GUI dev as my blueprint. So if I go into okay, so if I go into my vRealize automation, okay, so if I go into my vRealize automation, I'll be able to see, check. Okay, so go that in the catalog, I have this catalog item which is VRCS GUI dev, VRCS production, prod, and VRCS dev. These are the catalog items that are available for me in various automation. So the first thing that I'm doing in the pipe in this particular stage of this pipeline, I'm deploying a virtual machine. Next, I'm getting packages from Artifactory. Now this task, note that this is a script type of task. So I want to run a script in this machine, the deployed machine. So, and the best part is here, either you can do a user defined host where you specify the host name or IP, or read from pipeline or task repository. So for example, you start with this, you get to see that this is the stage, and inside the stage this is the first task that I have done, and what is the type that I want. So I want machine, right? So in the first task, deploy VM task, the machine, this whatever script that I want to run, it will be run against that machine. So I give the root ID, password, and configure password, or the script type, whether I want to run a PowerShell or Bash script. So had it been a Windows machine, I could have defined PowerShell commands here, and it would run the PowerShell script inside that Windows machine. So since it's a Linux machine, I know I would run Bash. Type script type is Bash. Now I can execute remote script file, or I'm defining the scripts here itself. So for example, I know that the template will have a remote script already present inside that virtual machine. I can remote execute that script, or I'm just defining it here. So this stage, what I'm doing, I'm getting the packages from Artifactory server. I'm just running curl command inside that virtual machine and getting the packages, changing the permissions on the shell scripts. This is what this exact step does. The second thing is setting up the environment. It's again a script. So I again run the script on the virtual machine that gets deployed, and here I'm just running the scripts that I have just downloaded from Artifactory server. Then installing web server is just running the script that I wanted to run, and the working directory, you can mention what's the working directory where you want to run that script, right? This is something that I have just created. I would delete it, right? If you want to see the script in the Artifactory server environment configuration shell script, what it does actually, it's configuring the yum repository. I'm configuring artifactory.repo file which points to my Artifactory server, and then I just install few of the packages Python pip, so that I will utilize this command later on to download Python packages, and then setting up Python environment to download to point to my Artifactory repository as a Python package repository, right? And then I'm just configuring Python environment. Next thing is web install. It actually goes ahead and install a web server. So what I'm doing here, I am installing, the first thing that I'm doing, I'm installing Python web server, and the source of that web server is our Artifact repository. So it will download the package from Artifact repository and then configure that web server in this environment. This is what it is doing. This is a pretty simple and straightforward example. You can customize it according to your requirements. The major idea is not how it is done. Thing is what I can do through it using Artifactory as a repository, using Code Stream to automate my different tasks, right? Once this is done, you just click on save as draft and then activate, right? This is what you do, right? Now I can execute this task. Okay, um, I will have to save. Okay, let me just delete this and then save as draft and activate, right? So now this task is activated. I can execute this task, and I can monitor the execution. So this is the test run that I have just started. It would show me, click on enable auto refresh, it would automatically refresh the page and show me the status in which the execution is in right now. So the first thing that this pipeline should do is deploy a virtual machine in vRealize automation. So let me go to vRealize automation, see the requests tab. There should be a task C. This is in progress, this task. I can go ahead and check the status of the run, the execution. So it will take 6-7 minutes to completely run this. I can go to vCenter server and see the tasks that it does at the back end to deploy the virtual machine, right? So the tasks that it's going to do is, first it's going to deploy the virtual machine, then set up the environment to get the packages from the Artifactory, runs the script to set up the environment, and then runs the script to install the web server. These are the sequence of tasks that it's going to do. See, the cloning of virtual machine has started at the back end. That means the virtual machine is getting deployed in vCenter server. So this is just a basic example. In typical pipelines, what we would like to do is, for example, this is my development environment. So if everything runs fine, I can run some add task to run some tests on it, and if the test is successful, I can add another stage. And this is a getting rule. From one stage to, I can rename it as a production fraud, and I can create my custom rules here. So no getting rule is whether the tasks are successful in dev stage or not, the production stage would be uh, executed. But I want it to depend on if outcome of a vRealize orchestrator workflow is successful, then only the second stage comes. So I can select a workflow. Right now it's test acceptance threshold or approval. There are custom workflows that you can define, and there are certain ways you need to configure, like you will have to tag the workflow in vRealize orchestrator, and then it will show up here. I will cover that in a second session, but in this session the primary idea is, why would I do this? Say I deploy a virtual machine, run a couple of things, and if I see that my environment or web server is running fine in dev environment, I can automatically move the workload or deploy the same virtual machines in the production environment. Also, I can add vRealize code stream as another task here. So deploy VM is vRealize code stream. So it's a vRealize code stream task. I can configure it so that I can add one pipeline here. Remember the pipeline that was configured as a test web or test Jenkins job run. I can select the same pipeline here, and so it's a nesting or nested pipelines that I can configure. So I can configure another pipeline to be part of a pipeline, so that when this task or job is run, that other pipeline would be called, and that would be executed. So that I can do that. Probably those are advanced configurations. I can configure, I can cover them in a later session. The idea of, as I mentioned already, that idea of this session is to cover the basic pipeline creation and what we can do through vRealize code stream to showcase that capability, right? So let's go back to pipeline execution. It's still executing. At vRealize vCenter level, I can see that this VM has been deployed. Let's see whether they have received an IP or not. Yeah, they have received. It has received an IP. The thing is, typically when in vRealize automation, we configure a template, and in vRealize automation we need to prepare the virtual machine to deploy the agent, and define a customization script so that vRealize automation will push the IP and the respective configurations through it, right? So this task is completely successful here. So if I go to items in vRealize automation, I can see that this virtual machine was deployed, right? This has been deployed here successfully. And if I go to console of this particular virtual machine, I would be able to see that it has been successfully created. The customization specification has run completely. And here I can see that all the respective jobs has run completely. This execution finished successfully, right? I can go ahead and check whether those packages are there or not. The first thing is, say, let's check the yum repository. See the Artifactory repository. It has so Artifactory repository has been configured for me. I can go to root and check the files that has been downloaded. So I can see that this webinstall.sh has been downloaded for me. Environment config.sh for has been downloaded for me. The projects uh, the project's directory structure was configured for me. This is the web server that we have configured through or pushed through Artifactory, and pip package should have been installed for us. Yes, it's there. So I can see that whatever I wanted to configure through vCodeStream, it has been configured and deployed successfully here. So this is a typical very easy pipeline creation. And the other thing is, you can check the reports, that pipeline success rate, and you check a pipeline duration, and you should be able to see the report. I can see that I have just run it once and it was successful. You can configure your own dashboards and add the pipelines here, so that you'd be able to see whether it was cancelled or not. How many stages are there? You just click on any stage and it would show you that what was the task that was done at this particular stage, what are the details, different details of that stage. See, I can see that this particular run or test run failed at this stage, so I can see cancel requested by user. So look at the dashboard, and at a single glance you'll be able to tell how many workflow runs was successful, which were the steps that they did, and if it failed, then where it failed. So this is what is code stream. This is how you would configure code stream and configure pipelines, pipeline executions, and configure endpoints. There are a lot more into code stream than this simple configuration, but again, as I mentioned in the beginning, I would reiterate the same point, that I can simply go ahead and use code stream to automate uh, very easily the infrastructure level tasks that I typically do, and automate through normal scripts. And it gives me a lot more flexibility to configure it through CodeStream. Thank you for listening to me. Hope this was helpful to you. Do drop me an email, or do write a comment of that if you want to listen to something else, or if you want me to cover something else as well. Thank you.